There's a game being played all around you, right now. At your job, in your relationships, in every conversation you have. And most people, they don't even know the rules. They're moving pieces on a board they can't see, making moves that hurt them, trusting the wrong people, being too honest at the wrong times, working twice as hard as their colleagues but somehow getting passed over for promotions. And they think it's bad luck, or unfairness, or that the world just doesn't recognize their talent. But here's the uncomfortable truth. There are rules to power, rules that have existed for thousands of years. And the people who understand them, they're winning. The people who don't, they're wondering why life feels so hard. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds dark, manipulative even. And look, I get it. When Robert Greene published the 48 Laws of Power back in 1998, people lost their minds. Some called it evil, a handbook for sociopaths, banned it from their companies. But here's what those critics miss. Greene didn't invent these laws. He observed them, studied 3,000 years of history, looked at how power actually works, not how we wish it worked. And whether you like it or not, whether you choose to learn these patterns or not, they're operating around you every single day. So let me ask you something. Would you rather understand how the game works, or would you rather stay blind to it while everyone else plays it on you? Because that's really the choice here. These aren't moral prescriptions. They're observations. Like gravity. You can choose not to believe in gravity, but if you step off a cliff, you're still falling. Same thing with power dynamics. Today I'm going to walk you through 7 laws from Greene's book. Not all 48. Because honestly, some of them are outdated. Some only matter if you're trying to run a kingdom in Renaissance Italy. But these 7, these are the ones that matter right now. In your career, your relationships, your daily life. These are the patterns you need to recognize. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Everything starts to make sense in a completely different way. So let's start with the law that probably cost more people their careers than any other mistake they could make. Law number 1. Never outshine the master. Picture this. France, 1661. There's a guy named Nicolas Fouquet. He's the finance minister to King Louis XIV. And Fouquet is crushing it. He's rich. He's powerful. He's got connections everywhere. He's basically the second most powerful person in France. And he decides to throw a party. Not just any party. The most lavish, extravagant party France has ever seen. He builds this incredible estate. Vaux-le-Vicomte. Absolutely stunning. Gardens that go on forever. Fountains everywhere. The finest art. The best food. Musicians. Fireworks. The whole thing costs more than most people would see in a lifetime. And he invites the king. His boss, essentially. Louis XIV. And Fouquet wants to impress him. Show the king what he's accomplished. Look at what I built. Look at what I can do. Here's the problem. The party was too good. Louis walked around this estate, and something clicked in his mind. Wait a second. My finance minister has a better palace than I do? How is that possible? How does the guy managing my money have more luxury than the actual king? And right there, Fouquet's fate was sealed. 3 weeks later, he was arrested, charged with embezzlement, all his property seized, and he spent the rest of his life rotting in prison, not because he was actually guilty, but because he made his king feel small. Now, think about your own life. How many times have you been in a meeting and had a brilliant idea, and you just blurt it out? Make your boss look bad in front of their boss. Or maybe you're really good at something, and you make sure everyone knows it. You're faster than your manager, more skilled, better connected. And you think that's how you get ahead, by showing everyone how great you are. Wrong. That's how you get pushed out. Because the person above you, they have an ego. They have insecurities. And the moment you make them feel inferior, even accidentally, you become a threat. Here's what this looks like in real life. You're in a presentation. Your manager says something that's not quite right. You know the correct answer. Do you correct them in front of the room? No. You let it go. Or you pull them aside later, make them think it was their idea. You're a designer and your creative director shows you their concept. It's okay, but you've got something better. Do you say, actually, my version is way better? No. You say, this is great. What if we built on this by adding? You give them the credit. You make them look smart. This isn't about being fake. It's about understanding that the person above you controls your path forward, and their ego is part of that equation. The smartest people make their bosses look brilliant. They let their superiors shine. They know that the way to rise is to make yourself valuable without making yourself threatening. You can be competent. You can be skilled, but you cannot ever make the person with power over you feel less than. And this is where it gets interesting. Because this law doesn't just apply upward. It applies to anyone who has something you need. Your client, your investor, your romantic partner's parents, anyone whose approval matters to your goals. You want to make them feel good about themselves in your presence. Not inferior, not shown up, not eclipsed. Most people think success is about being the brightest star in the room. Greene's saying the opposite. Sometimes the real skill is knowing when to dim your light just enough that someone else can shine. That's not weakness. That's strategy. Now this next law is going to feel like it contradicts everything you've been taught about authenticity and transparency. But stick with me. Law number 3, conceal your intentions. We live in a culture that worships transparency. Be yourself. Show your authentic self. Communicate openly. And look, in personal relationships, sure, that's important. But in competitive environments, when something important is at stake, total transparency is how you lose. Because when people know exactly what you want, they can either take it from you or block you from getting it. Think about it like poker. If everyone could see your cards, you'd never win a hand. The game only works because there's hidden information. Same thing with power. The moment everyone knows your full plan, your full strategy, what you really want, you've lost your advantage. They can prepare. They can counter. They can get there first. Here's a story from Greene's book. It's about Ninian de L'Enclos, a 17th century French courtesan. She was famous not just for her beauty, but for how she maintained power in relationships. And her strategy was brilliant. She never let men know how she really felt about them. She was warm but mysterious, interested but never desperate, and this drove them crazy. They couldn't figure her out, and that uncertainty kept them hooked. The moment she would have revealed her true feelings, shown all her cards, the game would have been over. They would have known they had her. And that changes everything. Now, I'm not saying you should manipulate people's emotions, but think about negotiations. You're buying a house. Do you tell the seller that it's your dream home and you'll pay anything? Of course not. You stay neutral. You point out flaws. You mention other properties you're looking at. You keep your real intentions hidden until you've got the best deal. Same thing at work. Your company is going through changes. You're thinking about leaving. Do you announce that? Tell everyone you're job hunting? No. Because the second you do, you lose leverage. You might get pushed out before you're ready. Lose your bonus. Get passed over for projects. You keep that information close until the moment it serves you to reveal it. Here's what people miss about this law. It's not about lying. It's about strategic ambiguity. It's about controlling information flow. In negotiations, in relationships, in business, the person with the information advantage usually wins. And you maintain that advantage by not showing your full hand until you have to. But here's the tricky part. You can't be so mysterious that people don't trust you. There's a balance. You need to seem open and honest while actually keeping your real plans and intentions protected. You share enough to build rapport. But you hold back the things that matter. The things that, if known, could be used against you. Think about how Steve Jobs ran product launches. Apple would work on something for years, and nobody knew what they were building. Competitors couldn't copy it. The press couldn't leak it. And when they finally revealed it, boom. Total surprise, total impact. If they'd been transparent about their roadmap, every advantage disappears. This law is basically saying, look, information is power, and you give that power away when you tell everyone everything. So be selective. Be strategic. Share what helps you. Conceal what protects you. And watch how much more effective you become. All right, now let's talk about something that's going to seem shallow, but it's actually one of the most important laws in the modern world. Law number 6, court attention at all costs. Here's the harsh truth. In a world with infinite content, infinite people, infinite options, invisibility is death. It doesn't matter how good you are if nobody knows you exist. You could be the best at what you do, but if you're invisible, you're irrelevant. Greene's point here is simple. Controversy is better than obscurity. Being talked about, even badly, is better than not being talked about at all. Now, before you think this means be obnoxious on social media, let me explain what he actually means. He's talking about understanding that attention is currency. And the people who succeed are the ones who know how to generate it. Sometimes through controversy, sometimes through spectacle, sometimes through mystery. But they understand that being noticed is step one to everything else. Look at Elon Musk. Love him or hate him. The guy is a master of this law. He says outrageous things on Twitter. He smokes weed on podcasts. He names his companies and products things that grab attention. And yeah, it makes some people angry, but it keeps him in the conversation. Tesla gets more media coverage than any car company on Earth. Not because they spend the most on advertising. They spend almost nothing, but because Elon himself is a constant source of attention. And that attention translates to billions in free publicity. Or think about any major brand. Nike didn't become Nike by playing it safe. They courted attention with controversial ads. The Colin Kaepernick campaign. Half the country was burning their shoes. Half was buying new ones. But everyone was talking about Nike, and that's the point. They stayed relevant, they stayed in the conversation. Greene uses this historical example. A guy named Pietro Aretino in Renaissance Italy. He was basically a professional attention seeker. He'd write scandalous pamphlets about powerful people, insult them, praise them, whatever got him noticed. And here's the crazy part. It worked. Powerful people started paying him not to write about them, or paying him to write favorably. He became wealthy and influential simply by mastering attention. Now, how does this apply to you? Well, think about your career. If you do great work but nobody knows about it, does it help you? Not really. You need to make sure the right people know what you're doing. That might mean speaking up in meetings more, sharing your wins, making your work visible. It might mean having a point of view and actually expressing it, even if some people disagree, because at least they know you exist. In the age of social media, this law is more relevant than ever. Your online presence matters, whether that's LinkedIn for your career or Instagram for your personal brand or whatever. The people who grow are the ones who consistently put themselves out there. Create content, share opinions, show their work. And yeah, some people will criticize, but that's better than silence. Criticism means you're doing something worth noticing. Here's the mistake people make. They think attention-seeking is always desperate or narcissistic. But there's a difference between attention for attention's sake and strategic visibility. You're not trying to be famous for being famous. You're trying to be known for what you do. You're trying to create opportunities by being in the right conversations. And you can't be in conversations if nobody knows you're in the room. So the question is, what can you do to be more visible? Not obnoxious, not fake, but genuinely more visible in the spaces that matter to your goals. Maybe it's writing articles. Maybe it's giving talks. Maybe it's just being more active in industry groups. Whatever it is, understand that in a noisy world, being quiet is not a virtue. It's a liability. Okay, this next law is probably the most ruthless one we'll talk about, and it's going to make some of you uncomfortable. But it's also one of the most practical. Law 15. Crush your enemy totally. Now, when you first hear that, it sounds psychotic, like something out of a movie villain's playbook. But here's what Greene actually means. If you're going to be in conflict with someone, if you're going to compete, if you're going to oppose them, you need to finish it completely. Because half measures always come back to bite you. When you leave your enemy wounded but alive, they recover. They remember, and they come back stronger and angrier. There's this story from ancient China. Two rival states, one defeats the other in battle. And the winning king is merciful. He lets the losing king keep his throne, shows compassion. Seems like the noble thing to do, right? 10 years later, that same king he spared comes back with a massive army, destroys him, takes everything. Why? Because mercy gave him time to rebuild, time to plan revenge. The first king's compassion was actually his biggest strategic mistake. Now, I'm not saying you should be cruel, but think about this in modern terms. You're in business. You got a competitor who's trying to destroy your market share. You get an opportunity to put them out of business. Do you take it, or do you ease up, show mercy, let them survive? Greene's saying take it, because if you don't, they'll recover and come after you again. And next time, they might win. Or think about this in a company setting. There's someone actively sabotaging you, talking behind your back, trying to undermine your projects. You got evidence. You could go to HR, get them fired, but you think, maybe I'll just talk to them, try to smooth things over, be the bigger person. What happens? They get more careful. They keep undermining you. But now they're sneakier about it. You didn't solve the problem. You just made it harder to detect. Here's what this law is really about. It's about understanding that when you're in a competitive situation, being half-hearted is worse than doing nothing. You either commit fully or you don't engage at all, because partial victories create resentful enemies, and resentful enemies are dangerous. Think about political campaigns, when candidates go negative on each other but then back off before finishing the job. What happens? Both sides are wounded. Both sides are angry. The conflict drags on, but when one side goes all in and completely dominates the narrative, the fight's over. There's a clear winner and loser. And everyone moves on. Now here's the uncomfortable question. When should you actually apply this? And the answer is, rarely. Most situations don't require this level of aggression. Most conflicts can be resolved. Most competitors can coexist. But there are times, specific times, when you're facing someone who genuinely wants to destroy what you're building. And in those moments, half measures are dangerous. You need to be decisive, complete, thorough. The mistake people make is being too aggressive too often, or not aggressive enough when it actually matters. You need to know the difference. Most of the time you cooperate, you compromise, you find win-win solutions. But when someone is genuinely your enemy, when they're actively trying to harm you, you can't afford to be weak. You have to be strategic and complete in your response. And here's the thing Greene emphasizes. This isn't about anger. It's not about revenge. It's about cold strategy. You're not crushing your enemy because you hate them. You're doing it because leaving them partially defeated is more dangerous than leaving them alone. It's a calculation, not an emotion. So the lesson here is simple. Pick your battles carefully. But when you pick one, finish it. Don't leave loose ends. Don't create wounded enemies who'll spend years plotting against you. Either resolve it completely or don't engage. Anything in between is where you get hurt. Now we're going to shift gears to something that feels totally different, but it's actually connected. Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. You know what kills value faster than anything? Being too available. Being everywhere. Always saying yes. Always showing up. Because here's what happens. People get used to you. They take you for granted. You become background noise. And the moment you're taken for granted, your power is gone. Think about how this works in relationships. When you first start dating someone, there's mystery. There's space between interactions. You're excited to see them because you don't see them all the time. But what happens when you're together constantly? When you're always available? The excitement fades. The mystery dies. They stop wondering about you because they already know everything. Same thing in business. There's a reason the most sought-after consultants are the ones who are hardest to book, the ones who say, I might have an opening in 3 months. Because scarcity creates value. When something is rare, it becomes precious. When it's abundant, it becomes cheap. Greene talks about this French diplomat, Talleyrand. This guy was a genius at strategic absence. He'd disappear from court just when everyone expected him to be there. People would wonder where he was, what he was doing. And when he returned, everyone wanted to talk to him. Hear what he'd been up to. He created value through scarcity. Here's how this plays out at work. You're the person who always volunteers for everything, always in every meeting, always available to help. Sounds great, right? Wrong. You become the utility player, taken for granted, but the colleague who's selective about what they take on, the one who says, "I'd love to help, but I'm focused on this major project right now." That person seems more valuable, more important. Their time seems precious because it's scarce. Or think about email response times. The person who replies to every email within 5 minutes, they seem desperate, like they have nothing else going on. But the person who takes a day to respond, they seem busy, important, in demand. Same message, different perceived value based purely on timing. Now, this doesn't mean ghost people or be rude. It means be strategic about your availability. It means understanding that constant presence can actually decrease your value rather than increase it. You want to be present enough to be relevant, but absent enough to be missed. Think about how this applies to social media too. The people who post 50 times a day, they become noise. But the person who posts once a week with something really valuable, you pay attention. Their words carry more weight because they're more selective. Here's the deeper principle. Scarcity drives desire, always has, always will. When something is easy to get, we value it less. When it's hard to get, we want it more. And you can apply this to yourself. Your time, your attention, your expertise. Don't give it away so freely that it becomes worthless. Create some scarcity. Create some mystery. Let people wonder what you're doing, where you are, what you're working on. And here's the really clever part of this law. When you do show up after an absence, you come back with more impact. People are curious. They've missed you. Your presence means something again. It's like a musician who doesn't tour for 5 years. When they finally announce a show, tickets sell out instantly. But the artist who plays every weekend can't fill a room. So ask yourself, are you too available? Are you always saying yes? Always showing up? Always responding immediately? And what would happen if you pulled back a little? Created some space? Made your presence more valuable by making it more rare? You might be surprised how much more people respect you when you're not always there. All right, we're past the halfway point. Let's talk about something that's especially relevant in the age of personal branding. Law 25. Recreate yourself. Here's a problem most people face. Other people put you in a box. They decide who you are based on first impressions, or based on what you used to be. And once you're in that box, it's really hard to get out. Your colleagues see you as the quiet analyst. Your family sees you as the irresponsible younger sibling. Your friends see you as the funny one. And those labels stick. Even when they don't fit anymore. Even when you've grown. Greene's point here is that you have to actively recreate yourself. You can't just let other people's perceptions define you forever. You have to be the author of your own image, shape how people see you. And that means being willing to break the old patterns and show up as someone new. Think about Madonna. Every few years, complete reinvention. New sound, new look, new persona. She went from material girl to spiritual seeker to dance pop icon to country influenced. And every time people thought they had her figured out, she'd shift again. That's not inconsistency. That's strategic reinvention. She controlled her narrative. She refused to be put in a box. Or look at Robert Downey Jr. In the early 2000s, he was known as a troubled actor. Drugs, arrests, jail time. Nobody would insure him for films. His career was dead. But he recreated himself, got clean, rebuilt his reputation, and became Iron Man. Became one of the biggest stars on the planet. He didn't just recover from his past. He completely transformed how people saw him. Here's how this applies to regular people like us. Maybe you started your career in one role. People see you as that. But you've developed new skills, new interests, new ambitions. How do you get people to see the new you? You have to actively signal it. Change how you dress. Change how you talk about yourself. Change what projects you take on. You have to show people that you're different now. This is especially important if you've made mistakes, if you failed publicly, if people remember you for something you're not proud of. You can't just quietly hope they forget. You have to actively recreate your image. Show them the new version. Make it impossible to ignore. But here's the tricky part. The reinvention has to be authentic enough to stick. You can't just put on a costume. You actually have to evolve. Greene talks about this idea of the bold move, the dramatic gesture that signals change. Maybe that's quitting your job to start a company. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it's moving to a new city. Whatever it is, it has to be big enough that people notice and recalibrate their perception of you. Think about athletes who transition to business, or actors who become directors, or corporate executives who become artists. These aren't just career changes, they're identity transformations. And the successful ones are the people who commit fully to the new identity. They don't hedge. They don't keep one foot in the old world. They leap. Now, why does this matter for power? Because when you control your own image, when you define yourself rather than letting others define you, you have more freedom, more options. You're not trapped by expectations. You're not limited by what people think you can do. You become unpredictable in a good way, full of possibility. The people who get stuck in their careers, in their relationships, in their lives, they're often the ones who accepted someone else's definition of who they are. And they never challenged it. They just lived inside that box forever. But the people who rise, who break through, who create new opportunities, they're the ones who said, "Forget what you think I am. I'm going to show you who I'm becoming." So here's a question for you. What box have people put you in? What label are you carrying that doesn't serve you anymore? And what would it take to break out of it? What bold move could you make? What new skill could you develop? What new way of presenting yourself could shift how people see you? Because the power to recreate yourself is one of the most liberating forms of power that exists. You're not stuck being who you were. You can become someone new. Let's get into something that's going to seem contradictory to what we just talked about, but actually it works together perfectly. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. So we just talked about recreating yourself, standing out, being different. And now I'm telling you to conform. What's going on? Here's the nuance. You need to understand when to stand out and when to blend in. And most people get this backwards. There's this idea in our culture that you should always be authentic, always express your true opinions, always let your freak flag fly. And sure, that's great for your personal life, for your art, for your close friendships, but in power dynamics, in professional settings, pointless contrarianism is how you lose. Think about it this way. Every group has norms, unspoken rules, ways things are done. And when you come in challenging those norms for no strategic reason, what happens? People see you as difficult, as not a team player, as someone who doesn't get it. And they push you out, not because your ideas are bad, but because you didn't respect the social rules. Greene uses this example. Pausanias, a Spartan general, after winning a major victory, he started acting Persian, wore Persian clothes, adopted Persian customs, and the Spartans were furious, not because being Persian was wrong, but because he violated their cultural norms. He made himself an outsider, and they killed him for it. Now that's extreme, but the principle applies everywhere. When you join a new company, a new group, a new community, there's a period where you need to observe, learn the culture, understand what's valued, what's taboo, how things work. And during that period, you conform. You blend in. You show that you understand and respect the norms. Only after you've established yourself, only after you have credibility and trust, do you start to challenge things, start to push boundaries, start to express your unique perspective, because then people see it as innovation, not disruption. They see it as leadership, not rebellion. Here's what this looks like practically. You're in a corporate job. The culture is conservative, suits and ties, formal presentations. You think that's outdated. You want to wear jeans and hoodies, make casual, creative pitches. Should you? Not at first. First, you play by their rules. You earn trust. You show you can succeed in their framework. Then, once you have social capital, once you have proven yourself, you can start bending the rules, showing up in smart casual, making your presentations more creative. And people will accept it because you've earned the right to be different. But if you come in day one wearing a hoodie to a suit culture, you're just the person who doesn't get it. You haven't earned the freedom to be different yet. This law is basically saying, pick your battles. Don't waste energy on superficial nonconformity. Save your rebellion for things that actually matter. If the dress code doesn't matter to your goals, just follow it. If the meeting format doesn't matter, just go with it. Don't make yourself an outsider over things that don't matter. Think about great innovators. They almost all learned the rules of their field first. They mastered the conventional approach, and then they broke from it. Picasso could paint realistically before he invented Cubism. The Beatles learned traditional music before they revolutionized it. They earned the right to be different by proving they understood the norms first. Now here's where people mess this up. They confuse this with being fake, with selling out. But it's not. You can think whatever you want. Believe whatever you want. This law is about behavior, not thoughts. It's about being strategic in how you present yourself. You're not changing who you are. You're just being smart about when and how you reveal it. And sometimes, conforming is actually the faster path to the freedom you want. You want creative freedom in your job? First, deliver results using their methods. Prove you understand the game. Then they'll give you freedom to experiment. But if you demand that freedom up front before you've proven anything, they'll just replace you with someone who will follow the rules. So the wisdom here is, know the difference between principles worth fighting for and superficial preferences. Know when your uniqueness will be valued versus when it will just get you labeled as difficult. Think freely. Believe what you want. But strategically choose when to conform and when to stand out. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. All right, final law, and this one ties everything together. Law 48. Assume formlessness. This is probably the most philosophical of all the laws, and it's about adaptability, about not being rigid, about understanding that the most powerful people are the ones who can change shape based on circumstances. Like water, water doesn't have a fixed form. It takes the shape of whatever container it's in. But it's also one of the most powerful forces in nature. It can carve through mountains given enough time. Greene's point is that rigid strategies fail. Rigid identities fail. Rigid plans fail. Because the world changes. Circumstances shift. What worked yesterday doesn't work today. And the people who are locked into one way of being, one way of thinking, one way of operating, they break when the world changes around them. Think about businesses. Look at companies like Blockbuster. They had a rigid business model, brick-and-mortar video rentals. And when the world shifted to streaming, they couldn't adapt. They were too committed to their existing form, too invested in who they were. Netflix, on the other hand, started as a DVD mail service, then became streaming, then became content production. They kept changing form based on what the market needed. That's formlessness. Or think about martial arts. There's this concept in Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's philosophy. Be like water. Don't commit to a rigid style. Don't lock yourself into one set of moves. Adapt to your opponent. Flow around their strengths. Exploit their weaknesses. The fighter who's locked into one style is predictable, easy to counter. But the fighter who flows, who adapts, who has no fixed form, they're dangerous. Here's how this applies to power. When people can define you, when they can predict you, when they know exactly how you'll respond in any situation, you've lost flexibility. You've become easy to manipulate. But when you're adaptable, when you can shift strategies, when you refuse to be pinned down, you maintain power. Think about negotiations. The person with a fixed position is weak. They've shown their limits. But the person who can move, who can find creative solutions, who isn't locked into one outcome, they have room to maneuver. They can find paths that the rigid person can't see. Or think about personal relationships. The person who's always predictable, always responds the same way, becomes boring, taken for granted. But the person who's unpredictable, who can be serious and playful, strong and vulnerable, logical and emotional, they keep people engaged. They're interesting because they can't be fully known. Now, this doesn't mean be inconsistent. It doesn't mean have no values or principles. What it means is don't lock yourself into rigid patterns that make you easy to counter. Don't become so attached to a specific strategy that you can't change when circumstances demand it. Don't define yourself so narrowly that you can't grow. Greene talks about how guerrilla fighters defeat conventional armies. The conventional army has a rigid structure, predictable tactics, known bases. The guerrillas have none of that. They appear and disappear. They attack from unexpected angles. They don't hold territory. They're formless, and that makes them incredibly difficult to defeat. In your career, this might mean not locking yourself into one industry, one role, one way of working. It means developing multiple skills, multiple options, multiple paths forward. So when one door closes, you have others. When one strategy fails, you have alternatives. And here's the thing about formlessness. It's scary for most people because it feels like you're not standing for anything, like you don't have an identity. But actually, it's the opposite. It's about having such a strong sense of self that you don't need external forms to define you. You know who you are, so you can be flexible in how you show up without losing yourself. The most powerful people understand this. They can be tough when needed and compassionate when needed. They can be bold or cautious depending on circumstances. They're not locked into being one thing. They're complex, multifaceted, adaptable. So the question is, where are you being too rigid? Where have you locked yourself into a fixed form that's limiting you? What strategies, identities, or patterns do you need to let go of to become more adaptable? Because in a changing world, the power belongs to those who can change with it. Okay, so we've covered 7 laws. Never outshine the master. Conceal your intentions. Court attention. Crush your enemy totally. Use absence to increase respect. Recreate yourself. Think as you like, but behave like others. Assume formlessness. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, these seem contradictory. Be visible, but be absent. Be yourself, but conform. Be formless, but recreate yourself. What's the actual guidance here? And that's exactly the point. These laws aren't a rigid system. They're a toolkit. You use different tools for different situations. Sometimes you need to stand out. Sometimes you need to blend in. Sometimes you need to be aggressive. Sometimes you need to be patient. The skill is knowing which tool to use when. Think about it like this. Power is contextual. What works in one situation backfires in another. What's smart with one person is stupid with another. So you can't just follow rules blindly. You have to understand the principles and then apply them intelligently based on the specific circumstances you're in. Here's what mastery looks like. You're in a meeting with senior leadership. That's when you don't outshine them. You make them look good. But then you're in a room with peers competing for a promotion. That's when you court attention. Make sure people know your contributions, different contexts, different laws, both correct in their moment. Or think about your career. Early on, you conform, you learn the rules, you prove yourself. That's Law 38. But then, once you've established yourself, you recreate yourself. You stand out. You show your unique value. That's Law 25. The laws work in sequence. And here's the thing about ethics, because I know some of you are wondering, is this manipulative? Is this wrong? Here's how I think about it. These laws describe how power works. Whether you like it or not, whether you use them or not, they're operating around you right now. The person who got promoted over you probably understands some of these laws. The colleague who seems to get everything they want, they're playing the game. So you have a choice. You can pretend the game doesn't exist. Call it manipulative, stay pure, and watch other people win. Or you can understand how it works, and then you can choose how to play. You can use these principles ethically, for good goals, to help people, to build things, to create value. The laws themselves are neutral. Like a knife, you can use it to cook a meal or hurt someone. The tool isn't good or evil. It's how you use it. And here's what I think separates ethical power from manipulation: intention and impact. Are you using these principles to create value for others while also benefiting yourself? That's ethical. Are you using them purely for selfish gain at others' expense? That's manipulation. Same tools, different intentions. Think about a good leader. They understand these laws. They know when to be visible and when to be absent. They know how to manage their boss's ego. They know how to create strategic mystique. But they use all of that to achieve things that help their team, help their organization, create something meaningful. That's power used well. The danger is when you use these laws unconsciously, when you're manipulative without even realizing it, or when you're naive and everyone else is using them on you. The goal is conscious competence, understanding the game, choosing how you play, using power deliberately rather than being used by it. And here's the real lesson of the 48 laws of power. The game exists. You're already in it. The only question is whether you're playing consciously or unconsciously, whether you're a piece being moved or a player moving pieces. And once you see the patterns, once you understand the laws, you can't unsee them. Every interaction becomes clearer. Every power dynamic becomes visible. Some people find that cynical. I think it's liberating. Because when you understand how the game works, you stop being confused. Stop wondering why things happen the way they do. Stop feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond your control. You start seeing the moves, the strategies, the patterns, and you can choose how to respond. So, here's what you actually do with all this. Start small. Pick one law that resonates with you, that applies to a situation you're in right now. Maybe you're being too available and you need Law 16. Maybe you're outshining your boss and you need Law 1. Maybe you're too transparent in negotiations and you need Law 3. Pick one, apply it. See what happens, and as you do, pay attention. Watch how other people use these laws. You'll start seeing them everywhere. That colleague who always knows how to manage up, they're using Law 1. That entrepreneur who's always in the news, that's Law 6. That friend who's always mysterious about their plans. Law 3. Once you know what to look for, you see it constantly. And over time, you build a more sophisticated understanding of power. Not as something mystical or evil, but as a practical skill, like communication or leadership or negotiation. It's something you can learn, something you can get better at, something you can use to create the life you want. But here's the final warning. Don't become obsessed with power for its own sake. Don't turn into someone who sees every interaction as a game to win. Because that's when these laws become toxic, when you forget that relationships matter, that trust matters, that genuine connection matters. The laws are tools. Use them when you need them. But don't let them define you. Power is not the goal. Power is the means. The goal is whatever you want to build, create, achieve, contribute, and these laws just help you navigate the human dynamics that stand between you and those goals. They help you avoid naive mistakes, help you recognize when someone is playing games with you, help you be strategic when strategy is required. So let's bring this home. You remember how we started. There's a game being played all around you. And now you know some of the rules. You're not blind to it anymore. You can see the moves. You can see when someone is using these laws on you, and you can choose how to respond. Power isn't good or evil. It's a force, like electricity. It can light up a city or it can hurt someone. The force itself is neutral. What matters is how it's directed, what it's used for, who's controlling it. And here's what Robert Greene understood. The people who pretend power doesn't exist, who ignore these patterns, who stay naive, they don't avoid the game. They just lose it, over and over, without knowing why. But the people who understand how power works, who learn the laws, who play consciously, they get to choose their outcomes. They get to build the lives they want. They get to protect themselves from those who would use these laws against them. That's not cynicism, that's wisdom. That's understanding human nature as it actually is, not as we wish it were. And once you have that understanding, everything changes. You stop being surprised when people act in their self-interest. You stop being hurt when you realize relationships have power dynamics. You stop being confused about why hard work alone doesn't guarantee success. Instead, you become strategic, intentional, effective. You combine your hard work with social intelligence, You combine your skills with an understanding of how to position yourself, how to build relationships, how to navigate hierarchies, how to create opportunities, and that combination, skills plus strategy, is what creates real success. Not just getting lucky, not just working harder than everyone else, but working smarter, playing the game consciously, using these ancient patterns of power to achieve modern goals. So that's the 48 laws of power, not all 48, but the 7 that matter most, the 7 that you can start using today, the 7 that will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. The question now is what you do with this knowledge. Do you use it? Do you ignore it? Do you pretend the game doesn't exist? That's up to you. But now at least you know the rules. And that's more than most people ever figure out.